I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. I talk all of the time on this podcast about how to be more confident, how to have good communication with your teenager, and how to be a better listener. And this is kind of the foundation of today's episode. My guest exhibits the type of confidence that I can only imagine I would have wanted to have when I was her age. Her name is Kristine, and she is a high school junior who has created an AI app called Elle to help teenagers with dating. She has spent 3 years developing this app, interviewing experts, testing, trial and error, and that brings me back to confidence. She has stepped out of her comfort zone. One of the things she's done that's so admirable, she reached out to me and she asked if she could come on the show. I talked with her and it was a heck yes. Because not only does she have a lot to offer, she can provide a valuable and unique insight to us parents on what it's like to be a teenager today and to be in the dating world. That's something that as much as we would like to be able to help our teenager with, we may have some advice and some tips and tricks, but we don't really know what it's like because it is so different. I'm also just really impressed by Elle's ability to move past the self-doubt and all of the restrictions and self-imposed beliefs that could be holding her back and doing the hard work to bring something into the world that she knows is needed. And that's why I brought her onto the show. She's a perfect example of that. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that teenagers face when it comes to dating, social media, of course, being at the top of the list, and also how a lot of our interactions have moved to online and how that can really impact the confidence to have in-person conversations. I'm also going to have her talk a little bit about her development of the app, what inspired her to do so, and what's next for her. So I know you're going to learn a lot from her, and I know she's going to inspire you to hopefully step out of your comfort zone. This is a good listen for you and for your teenager. Let's go ahead and dive into the show. Welcome to the podcast, Elle. I'm so glad to have you here. This is going to be such a fun conversation. And just thanks for coming on. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Of course, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So before we dive into all the topics we're going to discuss, I just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself to my audience and just tell everyone who you are.
Sure. I'm Kristine, and I'm a junior in high school. And I've basically spent the last 3 years of my life diagnosing the problem with teen dating and creating a solution to fix it. And so basically what I'm working on is an app. It's called Elle AI. And it has a few features, but the main one that's going to really hopefully fix teen dating is the AI avatar, which basically you hold down a button, you can ask any dating related question and it will respond with advice that's vetted by teen psychologists, teen dating experts, people, who've gotten their PhD in this. So it's not what does 16-year-old Elle have to say about dating, it's what do the professionals, people who've studied this their whole lives, have to say about dating, so that teens are getting their advice from a safe, vetted source rather than the expanses of the internet. I do also have a TikTok audience with about 200,000 followers where I post this safe teen dating advice. I like to say I read psychology papers and I take all the jargon out and I put it into teen slang and I make it, kind of have that viral touch. But it's just, I'm always trying to compress what the teen experts are saying and just help teens date more safely.
I have so many thoughts on this. First of all, it's just very, very impressive that you have created such an amazing thing at such a young age, and that it's a long-term project. It's amazing that you're at a school that's encouraging this type of work. It's so real world applicable, and it's helping to solve a problem. And this is a problem that, this is why I wanted to bring you on, is it's a problem. Like dating as a teen is a challenge. I know that
Yes.
my audience is parents. We know what it's like to be a teenager. We've all been teenagers, and we also remember how awkward it can feel to date and to meet people and all of that. And so none of that has changed,
Mhm.
but I know that there are some layers that make things even more challenging for teenagers. So I thought
Yes.
we could just kind of start, and I'd love to hear your
Let's do it.
perspective on that and what you're seeing as being a little bit more challenging for teens today.
I would honestly say that the entire landscape that teens are dating in has completely flipped on its axis. I would say social media is the number one problem, but I also think like direct messaging apps is kind of like an also secret underlying,
Mhm.
not issue, but just another layer where I think it's 75% of teens report texting their, or sorry, 85% of teens report texting their significant other every single day, and 75% report thinking that there might be an issue if they aren't texting their significant other
Mhm.
every single day. And so while before it was, you meet in person, maybe you call them when you get home and you're all excited and you talk to them, my mom tells me stories about trying to dodge her own mother hearing her on the landline, but just, you're very private from your parents.
Yeah.
It's not in person, it's all online. Teens are mainly meeting through Snapchat, which is an app that was literally designed for sexting. So that's just a
Mhm.
taste into really what's going on.
Mhm.
But then I would say the overarching issue is that teens can no longer go to their parents about it because of how much it's changed. When I go to
Mhm.
my mom and I say, the boy I like just saved my snap in chat or liked my story on Instagram, she is like, is that good or bad?
I don't
I
know
don't know
what
how to
that
react to that.
means.
Because the language around it has changed so much with social media. There's a new term every single week that teens are very fluent in, but parents are not. And so now, but before, it was there was no complexity around dating. It was just you like someone, so you go out with them. And
Yeah.
now there's so much around it
Yeah.
that it's hard for parents to keep up, and it's really hard for them to help their teen with it.
Yeah, because they just don't have, well, they don't have the language. They don't have the experience with it. And
Yes.
so the advice they may be giving could be incredibly outdated. And even if
Yes.
the teen is interested in hearing what the parent says, it's like, no, that's not how it works.
Oh, yeah, I mean, my mom is like always talking like she didn't really love to talk to her mom about dating. I mean, who really likes to talk
Right,
about
right.
dating with their parents? But now it's like impossible where even if I wanted to talk to my parents, we'd be speaking different languages and there wouldn't be she wouldn't feel confident in the advice that she's giving me. And so like that's kind of where the difference like in the shift has happened where now it's like even if you have a great relationship with your daughter and you like she opens up to you, there's kind of going to be a moment where you're like, wait, I actually don't know how to help you. So
Yeah.
that's kind of why I created this avatar that's trained on both psychology, what's the right thing to do, what's the safe thing to do. I have a panel of moms who vet everything the bot says to make sure it's approved.
Okay.
But then it's also trained on every single new term of the week. What's a situationship? What everything. And so it kind of it's able to hold both and then give teens the best advice for every situation that they encounter.
Yeah, I was actually playing around with the app yesterday to kind of just see how it is. And I was really impressed, first of all, by the advice that was given and also how conversational it seemed. It's
Yes.
like incredible that something that's not even an actual person can sound like an actual person so much.
Right. That's kind of what I wanted it to emulate is like an actual conversation, an open
Yeah.
conversation. I don't want it to feel like a therapy session where you're just kind of venting and then
Mhm.
maybe being given like a salute. I wanted it to feel like a conversation where you're talking to your super smart friend. Like
Right.
that's kind of what I wanted it to feel like. I don't want it to replace because I think there 100% needs to be a parent-teen connection around this, and the bot totally is like, hey, this is something that you should talk to your parents about whenever you breach sex or just anything that the bot is like, hey, this you should talk to your parents about that because that's so
Yeah.
important and it actually gives like how you could approach your parent and talk to them about it. But 100%, the bot is supposed to be conversational and feel like really easy to talk to, where it doesn't feel like, okay, I have to go, ask my mom about this. Like I'm worried about how she's going to react. The bot is like, doesn't
Mhm.
matter what you tell it, it wants to help you and wants to give you the safest way to like deal with
Yeah.
whatever situation you're in.
I know all the parents that are listening are probably like, well, is this safe? And so that definitely answers that question. But I
Yes.
wanted to go back to the challenges that you had mentioned
Mhm.
and the challenges that social media and texting apps and everything bring to it. Can you talk a little bit more about the
Yeah.
impact of social media on
Yeah,
teen?
totally. I think that social media in general kind of like it shifted everything. So in two different ways that they don't quite contradict each other, but let me explain. So the first is Snapchat specifically, and I would say Instagram, have made teen dating a lot more about looks than personality. I think that obviously it's always teens are hormonal, and it's always kind of been like
Yeah.
an aspect, but now it's just like this is an average teen situation. A
Yeah.
guy will add a girl on Snapchat, and the first thing he will say to her is WYLL. That stands for what you look like. That is
Oh,
the first thing I got. This is like notorious. I've made videos that have gone absolutely viral because it's so relatable to teens. This is
mhm,
notoriously the first thing that a guy will say on
mhm.
Snapchat. WYLL. And the girl will then send like a few good photos of herself, and the guy will choose to unadd her and block her or continue the conversation.
Wow.
That is one little like look into what is going on,
Okay.
where it is just completely. I mean, it when I first started dating, I was not allowed to be on social media until I was 13, but I was on it a little earlier than that. So,
Yeah.
mom,
Yeah.
if you're listening, shut your ears. But
Sorry.
I think that's also a problem is when
Yeah.
parents have restrictions like that. I felt I couldn't go to my mom because I was like, this guy on Snapchat that I'm not allowed to have. Just so it just added another layer. But it was really surprising to me hearing like seeing my personal experience, hearing my friends' experience, but then also when I started posting on TikTok, how many DMs and messages I was getting from girls where they would send me screenshots of the things that boys were saying to them. And it's not like girls are perfect either, but this is just a scenario where like guys were begging girls for nudes and like
Mhm.
just crazy things like that where it's just kind of become like it's very different than it used to be.
Mhm.
Attractiveness has always been a thing, but
Yeah.
now it's kind of become the sole part of dating is you see them on Instagram, you like them, so you start a conversation, you add them on Snapchat, you ask WYLL, and then
Mhm.
that's how you start your conversation. And so it's become entirely based on looks, which is just so
Yep.
not the right way to do it. But then the second part of it is teens are dating less. That's a statistic. Teens are having less sex, they're drinking less, and all that stuff. But what that
Yeah.
has led to is the teen loneliness epidemic.
Yes.
And so that's been the other thing where I get hundreds of DMs a week of teens being like, "Hey, I really like this girl or I really like this guy, but I don't know how to ask him out. I don't know how to ask her out. I don't know what to say. I'm so confused." They just haven't developed the social skills because everything has become so online where you can
Yeah.
have online friends. COVID, I mean, made this so much worse because it was
Mhm.
entirely online for so long. But I mean, just having the ability to have online friends and online relationships has
Yeah.
made that the easier outlet. So when
Right.
there's actually they're confronted with an in-person like, hey,
Mhm.
go up to her and ask her out, they're like, oh my God, I would never do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I post videos and they're not these crazy
Yeah.
insights. This is how you go up to a girl. You walk up to her, ask her about herself. Like it's I mean, things that most people would think is common sense, but teens, I get the comment sections are filled with, haha, good advice, but I'd never do this. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm way too scared. And so I think those are the two things is it's become very looks based and rejection and teen dating, it's all become way worse.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Well, first of all, when you're in person with somebody, it's different than seeing what they look like in a picture,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So you send me a picture, there's no energy behind it. Like you have no personality. It's full visual,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
so that obviously is going to be a challenge. And then to speak to what you were saying about the ability to have interactions and in-person
Hmm.
conversations, I see this with the teens I work with as well.
Hmm.
It's not a personal failure. It's just they have not had as much experience with in-person
Yes, yes.
conversations.
I couldn't agree. It is not. Boys don't want to be acting like this. Girls don't want to be
Yeah.
scared. Like boys, they're just getting their information from the worst parts of the internet. They're
Uh-huh.
not having actual practice because I don't know if parents know this, but prom and homecoming are not about asking the girl you like to prom. It's all friend groups setting it up. And so there's not even that, which was like a big for you ask your first date to prom. Now
Right.
it's all become a setup where it's just for Instagram photos and it's not
Yeah.
actually teens pairing up. And so like it's just really changed, and it's not it's all about like looks, and it's just kind of it and the Instagram photo, and so social media has just kind of like changed it all.
So much. And so that brings me to so many of the parents that I work with and that I talk to, they know that these things are
Mhm.
challenging for their teenager, but they feel so helpless because they don't necessarily want to restrict and not allow social media. But at the same time, if they do allow it, then there are these challenges. And all of the teens are struggling with these things and they just feel so lost. And so I'm wondering if you could
Yeah,
just give us like an insider perspective of
totally.
what could be helpful here.
I'm going to give an insider perspective. Every mom listening, if you've restricted your teen from being on Snapchat or Instagram, think again. They are probably on it. I think that that's the number one thing is it
Yeah.
has become this pillar of the social scene,
Yeah.
being on Instagram. And I think that's why parents are so confused because there's all these cons, but not being on it, you're missing out on so much. Like, I know a lot of my friends are like, oh, I have camp friends that I want to keep in contact with. I know
Right.
that that's a big thing. Or even just like if something happens after school and you're not on Snapchat or Instagram, you won't know about it. And so there's this huge social element to it because it's become like such a core of it, that it's just I don't want to say impossible, but it's really hard to keep your teen off by just restricting it. So what I always say, I mean, even my own experience with my mom.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was I ended up confessing to her because I was like feeling so guilty about
Yeah.
it. And we actually had a conversation and we were like, okay, instead of just having it restricted, let's set some boundaries. So on Snapchat, you can kind of add people, and you can add anyone on the entire internet that has an account, you can add them. But instead, what we did was we had approved friends that I could add on
Mhm.
Snapchat. So so there was like 6 or 7 of my closest friends that I could add, and I could be on their stories so I could see what's going on.
Mhm.
And then on Instagram, I could have an account, but I couldn't post. And so it's just kind of having that balance where when you completely restrict it, what you're restricting is the conversation around it. You know, you're not actually restricting them from being on social media because it's just one download away. Even
Yeah.
if you have all the parental controls, there are ways to get around them that parents don't know about. I mean, if you take your mom's phone for 5 minutes, you can
Mhm.
download and click accept. It's like there's just a lot of things, or
Yeah.
even screen time, you can figure out the password. Like every single teen that has restrictions is thinking of how to get around them. So that it's just
Yeah.
a lot of brain power on this specific subject. So what I would recommend is learning about all the different social medias. There's a ton of videos. I mean, even watching my videos and talking to
Mhm.
my bot, asking about it, being curious instead of just being so like, no, 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 this is bad because
Yeah.
it can be bad, but it's worse if there's no conversation around it and your teen is just
Mhm.
let loose on the internet.
Thank you for saying that. This is something that I say over and over and over. And it is hard for parents to be curious because there's so much fear and judgment,
Yes,
and I want to protect my child at all
totally.
costs. But like you said, the benefit is the conversation that
Right.
happens around it.
No, totally.
Right. And that's where the curiosity comes in and just having a conversation. And that is much better than creating this barrier to where your teenager feels like they need to hide it.
Because then if something is going wrong, it's just another reason that they couldn't go to you, and
Yeah.
that's what you should want is having that open dialogue about social media. Like,
Mhm.
for me, like I wouldn't even I don't even know how I'm just so because of the boundaries I've created with my parents, I feel very like social media literate where I'm like, I obviously am not going to respond to that guy. I'm not going to add the guy that I don't know. And it's just kind of become like this, like, I want to say like RQ, where it's like knowledge about the world, where you just have like
Yeah.
this social media RQ where you're like,
Uh-huh.
okay, this means this. Cause like, I talk about it with my mom and she's able to give an outsider perspective where she's like, okay, so I know that you're the teen, you're the one on social media, but
Mhm.
a random guy adding you, that doesn't seem like a good
Right.
person to like have in your social circle. And so I really do believe in the conversation around it.
So I'm curious, just this leads me to my thought is how to what type of a conversation would be helpful to have with a teenager about safety
Mhm.
and about just awareness? Because if the teenager or if the parent doesn't even know that these things are an issue, like how can
Yeah.
they educate themselves so that they can make sure that their teenager is protected around those things?
Well, I mean, what I've kind of actually done is that exact thing, is I wanted to educate myself. So it wasn't just my personal experience and my friend's personal experience, which
Mhm.
is, obviously a primary source, but I also
Mhm.
wanted to just obviously be educated on every side of what's going on social media. And so I did a deep dive on kind of, and you do not have to go as deep as I went, but honestly, looking up on YouTube, um, Snapchat, and I think here's the key: don't look up Snapchat horror stories because
Uh-huh.
there's horror stories for everything.
Yes.
That's the extreme case. That's not likely what's happening to your kid, but
Yeah.
looking up like, okay, Snapchat guidelines, or like what exactly is going on. My mom actually downloaded Snapchat so that she could add me, so that she could
Mhm.
like actually experience what it's like.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way. Like just making sure that you're like literate enough in
Yeah.
social media where you can have a conversation where you're speaking the same language. I think that's super important. And I think if you approach your teen in more of like a, how can we get you on social media? Like, how can we make me comfortable? I'm sorry, I think this is unsafe. So how can we get you on social media in a comfortable way where we have boundaries in place where, making it kind of like a positive rather than being like, we need to set some boundaries on social media, being like,
Uh-huh.
I want you to be on social media. What can we do? What are
Yeah.
some boundaries we can have where I'll feel comfortable and you'll also feel that you're getting like the social out of it that you want?
I love that idea. And I also wanted to reinforce what you had said about
Mhm.
educating yourself on all perspectives
Yes.
because it can be, and this is a problem with social media in general, is you get stuck in the loop of like-mindedness and then you get into
Yes.
this catastrophizing of the worst possible scenario. And
Yep.
everybody does it, parents, kids, everybody does it, but
Mhm.
just to be aware that that's something that could be happening. And even using AI to help you see another perspective, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Give me some alternative ideas and perspectives out there, and then be willing to look into it.
I mean, yeah, I think that's amazing advice. I really do think that it's figuring out like it's easy to kind of like get scared by everything that's going on because there
Mhm.
are, on Discord, there's stories of people running away from home and getting
Yeah.
kidnapped, but there's also stories of people walking to school and that same thing happening. And so it's like making sure that you're just making creating, like, not restricting it, but teaching your teen, okay, this is how you deal with this.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that effectively, you have to know at least a few different perspectives of how this all plays out.
And to get back to the how to support your teenager in the world of dating,
Yeah.
obviously that your TikTok, you've got some really great videos on there. I watched a few of them. I'm like, this is, it sounds so straightforward and basic, but it's so hard to do. And so I love the approach. I love the app. And is there anything else as far as in the world of dating and socializing and feeling more comfortable with
Yeah.
in-person interactions that
Mhm.
parents can do to help their kid with that?
Okay, I'm actually going to give a book recommendation.
Okay.
It's called The Courage to Be Disliked. And this book, my dad actually recommended it to me, but it totally changed the way that I thought about interaction. I'm 16, so I'm still, I preach about this is exactly how to date on social media, but then I actually have to go do it myself, and it's a
Right.
little harder. But I think that that book really, really helped me because it
Okay.
is kind of like this perspective. It's Alderian psychology, which is like uh, interesting, and like there's a few parts of the book where I was like, I don't think this really applies to me. I'm a
Uh-huh.
teenager, but
Sure.
what it was really great at was giving me a perspective of like basically, okay, you should actually, when you're dating, you should be thinking, am I compatible with this person?
Uh-huh.
Rather than how can I get them to like me? Like, just
Yeah.
kind of like, I feel like in the teen mind, the number one thing always going on in here is, oh my God, how do I get everyone to like me? They don't like me.
Mhm.
Like, that's just
Yeah.
how it is. It's, oh gosh, did I say the wrong thing? There's just all this anxiety around it.
Mhm.
I'm sure every parent, like,
That
kind of,
goes into adulthood too.
yes, no, no, exactly. It's like, but I think like especially with like high school being all like basically a popularity contest, which
Right.
is awesome. It's super intense when you're a teenager, and so
Mhm.
kind of having the perspective of like, okay, having the courage to be disliked, be yourself, because
Mhm.
being fake around people
Yeah.
is worse. Like having a big group of friends that you're fake around is worse than being yourself with a small group of friends. It kind of like teaches all of that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
now, like that's all I preach is whenever I go on dates myself, whenever my friends are getting ready for a date, I'm like, you don't have to be nervous because all you're doing is seeing if you're compatible. You're not
Yeah.
trying to put on this act to get them to like you. You're just trying to see,
Mhm.
are you compatible with this person? And so like that major shift, I think really helps. Like honestly, me,
Uh-huh.
but like also like my friends and on TikTok, like that. I actually yesterday I got like a DM that was like 4 months ago I saw your video that was like you should focus on being compatible rather than getting them to like you, and that helped me overcome my anxiety about dating. And I actually asked the girl I liked out, and we've been dating for the last like 4 months. And I was like, oh my
Wow,
god.
that's amazing.
So it really, I think for teens, the fear of rejection is the number one reason
Yes.
that they don't ask people out. That's just
Hmm.
100% the number one reason. And so just kind of giving them that book's my recommendation, but also just kind of like trying to instill in them this idea of like being liked is not your number one priority, especially with dating, because that's how you get stuck in a toxic relationship. You're so focused on,
Yes.
oh my God, do they like me, that you even forget if you like them in the first place.
Right.
And focusing on compatibility, which feels a lot more manageable. It's like, go and ask her out to see if you're compatible because you never know. Not go ask her out, and if she doesn't like you, it's the end of the world. I think like that's kind of the shift that I teach on my TikTok, and my bot
Mhm.
teaches as well, that I've carried into me and my friends' lives as well.
That's so great. And even just coming from a parental perspective, I've looked at
Mhm.
your TikTok and I've watched your videos, and those videos have helped me as well. Like your input and your insight, and you're very
Yep.
clear in how you explain things.
Mhm.
Also, for me, being a parent, seeing the comments underneath helps me get a perspective of how
Yes.
other teenagers feel.
Yes, I'm actually in the midst of writing a paper that's kind of like diagnosing the problem and then giving my solution.
Yeah.
But part of that is kind of, I've been looking through all of my DMs. I'm trying to conduct a study based
Yeah.
on TikTok comments, TikTok DMs, and then my bots,
Yeah.
interactions. And so it's a little funny to piece it all together. But as I've been reading through the comments and all of my DMs, it's really given me like such great perspective. And every parent has access to my TikTok comment section, and so just scrolling through that for a second, you really get to understand like what it is, because
Mhm.
that's what I've always said is my TikTok content is not this super complex corner cases. It's
Mhm.
literally, this is how you ask out a girl. And so, and
Mhm.
when the comments underneath it are like, I would never do that,
Yeah.
that's kind of when there's like an issue in the entire generation.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Yeah. So I am for sure going to be putting a link to your TikTok and everything so that they can check that out. And I'm just curious, and I know my listeners would probably love to know, is where do you plan to go with this? Like what are your next steps here?
So I'm a high school student, so college is kind of like my logical next step. My
Uh-huh.
sister is at Stanford University,
Okay.
so no pressure there from my parents. But I would also like to join her at Stanford for the
Okay.
networking, because this isn't something I see as like my high school project. I see this as the next 10 years of my life, because
Mm.
as the more research I do and the more I diagnose the problem, the more I feel inclined to solve it, because I believe I have a solution that can help so many teenagers with their confidence, with their ability to go up to people and ask them out,
Mhm.
develop those social skills that are so crucial. And so for me, I just launched my app 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And so I'm just working to get the word out there about my app, and then also I'm just trying to get on podcasts to
Yeah.
talk to parents also, because I think that's important, where it's not just the teens, because it's hard for teens to do it by themselves. So also educating parents on this is how you can support your teen, and so just kind of trying to get it from both ends, so that I can actually drive change in the not just my generation, but also just generations to come.
Yes, and you and I have a similar mission on that. Like we
Mhm.
both are on the mission of seeing these challenges that are happening
Yes.
and making it be a catalyst for positive change.
That's why when I saw your podcast, I mean, I knew I had to reach out in any way I could,
Yes.
because I think that that's what's so important, is that the people that there's a lot of people on this mission, but I think that, they're when you look up teen dating advice on TikTok, my videos come up. So,
Watch out.
it's kind of
Like, you never know what you're gonna get. Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah.
like it's there. I think that like just having more people trying to get this out there, because it is become such a problem after COVID,
Yeah.
is awesome. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk today.
Well, it's been a joy to have you on here. I really appreciate you sharing your insight and your time, and I look forward to seeing all of the great things you'll be creating in the future.
Thank you so much.
If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.